Shalom, shalom, everyone. Welcome to the House of Selah Ministry as we continue in the deep reading through the book of Hebrews, written by the Apostle Paul. This is sponsored by the House of Selah Ministries and presented by yours truly, Brother Andrew Brown. Before we continue, I want to make sure I mention there was a typo in part 12. We were speaking on Isaiah 52, and I typed Isaiah 52, verse 17, when that's typo. It should be verse 7. So the audience who listened in previously, you might have caught that. If not, please be aware. I meant Isaiah 52, verse 7, not verse 17. You would have found that out if you read it. There's no verse 17. It's a short chapter. All right? Now, we were talking about, in the previous lesson, we were talking about the Matthew. I'm going to go to the next slide here. We were talking about Matthew 25 and 36, or Matthew 25 and several verses up to 36 to talk about when I was naked, you clothed me, for example. When I was sick and you visited me, and when I was in prison and you came unto me. We were discussing how he wasn't talking in a literal sense, but he was talking in a spiritual sense. And we went through every statement. But Minister White brought it to my attention that I did not include who are the sick, and I did not include who are the prisoners. So before we continue in Hebrews chapter 8, I'm going to pause and go back to Matthew 25 and detail verse 36 for us, where it speaks of the sick and the prison. All right? I just want to set that out before we continue. So let's go ahead and move forward. Matthew 25, verse 36. Naked and ye clothed. I was sick and ye visited. I was in prison and ye came unto me. Who are the sick? Who are the sick? I'll start the reading off today. Mark chapter 2, 16 through 17. And when the scribes and Pharisees saw him eat with publicans and sinners, they said unto his disciples, how is it that he eateth and drinketh with publicans and sinners? When Yahusha heard it, he said unto them, they that are whole have no need of the physician, but they that are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. So the righteous are the ones who are whole, but the sinners are sick. So we already know now. He's not talking about, someone who has a cold or might have, cancer or something like that. Not saying he didn't have the authority to remove that as well, but he was talking of a spiritual sickness, sin. In other words, you could say, I was in need of righteousness, and you visited me. And righteousness is the need or the becoming of a person who is obedient. All right? I have achieved righteousness, for example. But we're going to really go into this. All right? This is just the tip. All right? Any questions so far? Okay? Let's continue. When I was sick, and you visited me, who are the sick? Brother, can you read 1 Peter and Isaiah 53 for me?
I just stepped away from my
okay.
I'm sorry.
No problem. No, that's all right. Let me see who's able to read. You want to read for me, Brother Gianni?
Yeah, I can.
Who
his own self bare our sins in his own body on the tree, that we being dead to sin should live unto righteousness. By Christ ye were healed, for ye were as sheep going astray, but are now returned unto the shepherd and bishop of your souls.
All right, go ahead and read the next.
Isaiah 53 and 5. But he was wounded for our transgression. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed.
All right. Thank you, brother. So Yahusha's sacrifice healed our sickness. That's what 1 Peter 2:24-25 is speaking of. Sin. He's telling the sickness of sin. And the sick are sinners of Yashar. Why? Because both of these two scriptures are only to one audience. We can talk about that later, but if you really read Isaiah 53, he was not talking to the world. Isaiah and Peter were speaking to the Hebrew. All right? And we've outlined 1 Peter before in other lessons where we demonstrated that audience clearly, and as well in Isaiah. All right? So right now it's pointing to this particular audience is being referenced in Hebrews. We've already told you that it is Hebrews. And the sinners that Yahusha came for was his own people, because they were the ones that were breaking the covenant, the Torah. All right? All right, let's continue. All righty. So we talked about the sick, and the sick are sinners. So we need to speak upon the prisoner, all right, or who's in prison. I was in prison, and you came unto me. Who are thee and who are in prison? Isaiah 42:6-7. I, Yahuwah, have called thee in righteousness. I will hold thine hand and will keep thee, and give thee for a covenant of the people, for a light of the Gentiles. That's a mistranslation. It's easy. All you got to do is look at Hebrew. That word really is goy for nations, not Gentiles. And that makes sense if you pay attention to the audience and the way the chapter and the way Isaiah reads, if you pay attention. So he's talking about a light to the nation, to open the blind eye, to bring out the prisoners from the prison. And we're going to specify who the prisoners in prisons are, so you're going to know then they can't be light to the Gentiles. It's got to be light to the nations. Why? Because they've been scattered. And he's going to say this. He's going to say this. And them that sit in darkness out of the prison house. Why would he imprison Gentiles when he had no relationship with them? So why would he be a light to them when he had no covenant with them? So we're going to talk more about that. All you got to do is think through. So we're going to continue in Isaiah, because Isaiah really goes into explaining who is in prison. All right? All right. Let's continue. Any questions, by the way? All right. Let's keep it going. Brother Isaac, you mind reading Isaiah 42:18-21?
Yes, sir. Hear ye deaf, and look, ye blind, that ye may see. Who is blind but my servant, or deaf as my messenger that I sent? Who is blind as he that is perfect, and blind as Yahuwah's servant, seeing many things, but thou observest not. Open the ears, but ye heareth not. Yahuwah is well pleased for his righteousness' sake. He will magnify Torah and make it honorable.
All right. We're going to keep reading, but I want you to see here. This is a perfect opportunity to define the word perfect in this use, because it's not speaking to a person who is perfect in their way, in their life. He's not speaking to that. The word for perfect here is the Hebrew word shalom, not shalom. This is actually its root. And its definition is to be in a covenant of peace. So, who are the Gentiles we just spoke of in verses 6 and 7? If this is a covenant, and when you are in a covenant with Yah, and you are obeying the covenant with Yah, by default, you are at peace with Yah. That's why we just read that the chastisement of our peace was upon him. Why? Because Yahusha made it a way for us to have peace with Yah. Why? Restoring us back to the covenant. Why? Bringing us back into Torah. How to fulfill the Torah. So this is talking specifically of a people who are in covenant. Now you can imagine why they don't say, rewording it, who is blind as he that is in a covenant of peace with Yah. They're not going to say that because then it specifies the audience. These are the ways that the translators of the Bible in English have done to try to get away from the verses pointing to a group of people. But I think the ancient Hebrew lexicon of the Bible even points a finger to the people as well, to Yashar as well. All right, are we following? Any questions on this? All right, we'll keep it going. So here's shalom in the ancient Hebrew lexicon. Looking at the old Hebrew means this. It means complete, to be in a state of wholeness. Also, to restore or make right. I'm sorry, I don't know why that's there. I'm surprised the typo didn't pop up. But that word is right, to make right through payment or restitution. So a person that is complete is a person who is in covenant. A person who is not in covenant with Yah, and specifically with his people, they are not complete. They are lacking. But to become complete is a restoration. Listen to this. Through payment or restitution. That is salvation. All right? That is salvation. That is the recompense. The repayment or the redemption. All right? That is redemption it's talking about. The Gentiles didn't require that because the Gentiles were never with Yah in the first place. How could they be redeemed or restored when they were never his people? This is why the English translators don't want you to read Hebrew because they can't lie when you look at the Hebrew. Now, the original Hebrew word in the Old Hebrew is the sound of the shepherd. Also, that's also defined as that. It's the letter Shin, Lamed, Mem. Shin are the symbol of the two front teeth where you press or chew. Lamed is the staff of authority, the master teacher, which is Yahusha. And Mem is water or divine revelation. This is the closed or hidden revelation that only can be taught by the master. So those who are complete are those who feed on Yahuwah's Torah. Who feed is a continuous thing. No one here in this lesson can eat once a year. In order for you to survive physically, you must eat continually. In order for you to survive spiritually, you must feed continually. Read and study continually to spend time in Yahusha's Torah. So only Torah then gives us peace, right? This is the root word of shalom. So the root of peace is Torah. The restoration is through Torah. Your completeness or wholeness is by Torah. Can't get this in English. So who is the audience that Isaiah is speaking to? It can't be anybody else. The Hebrew makes it clear. All right? All right, anybody have any questions? Everybody follow.
No questions.
Okay. All right. Let's move to the next slide. All right. Sister Billy, are you able to read?
I am, yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am. I can hear you.
Okay. Isaiah 42:22-25. But this is a people robbed and spoiled, They are all of them snared in holes, and they are hid in prison houses. They are for a prey, and none delivereth, for a spoil, and none saith, Restore. Who among you will give ear to this? Who will hearken and hear from the time to come? Who gave Yaakov for a spoil, and Yashar to the robbers? Did not Yahweh, he against whom we have sinned? For they would not walk in his ways, neither were they obedient unto Torah. Therefore he hath poured upon him the fury of his anger, and the strength of battle. And it hath set him on fire round about, yet he knew not. And, that word is not coming up on my head.
That's all right. And it burned him.
Okay. And it burned him. Thank you. Yet he laid it not to heart.
All right. Thank you, Sister Billy. Yeah, sometimes I can't explain it either. Sometimes it just don't pop up or it just cut off a little bit. So here, Yahuwah is calling his people who are hid in the prison house. Why? Because they have sinned. Why? Because they disobeyed his Torah. They wouldn't walk in his ways. So the blind eyes of the prisoners, which is Jacob, or Yaakov and Yashar, they were blind and prisoners spiritually due to the sin. So the audience has been made very clear here. Why would these verses point to Yashar over and over again, but in that one little verse, light to the Gentiles? But the rest of the context that we've been reading in this same chapter has been all Yashar. We don't pause to ask that question. This is all about Yashar being the prisoners in the prison house. All right? Oh, excuse me. Anybody have any questions? Is this clear so far? All right. Let's continue. We're going to move to Isaiah 61:1. Still speaking on the church prisoners, all right? The Ruach of Adonai, Yahuwah, or Adonai, Yahuwah, is upon me, because Yahuwah has anointed me to preach good tidings unto the meek. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captive, and the opening of the prison to them that are bound. Now, we already told you who was in the prison. We just made it very clear, right, in chapter 42. But let's define this so we can understand how the slight wording in the English translation to hide really what this is speaking to takes away from some of the direction of towards the audience. Me to preach good tidings is actually one Hebrew word. It's basar. And that word should sound very familiar. It should sound like a root to a word that we hear all the time. Can anybody guess what basar is the root of?
Torah.
Basora. Right. And you see it right here in second bullet. Basora, the gospel or the good news. So, to gladden with good news, you receive good news. This is speaking to the gospel, as we coined it in modern day terms. But this is Isaiah speaking of this. So this is a good news, good tidings. All right? We're going to talk a little more, though. I want to flesh this out so we can talk a little more about it. 1 second here. Let's move to the next slide. The word liberty is a poor English translation of a Hebrew word, Yahor. It means generation. And this is a surprise to me when I was looking at this, because the word liberty is typically used, especially in the Greek, to translate the Greek word for freedom or free, or to be free. Generation as a circle or a circling of the family, meaning father to son, and son grows up to become a father himself, completing the circle or generation. All right? The Merriam-Webster Dictionary calls this word, generation, a body of living being constituting a single step in the line of descent from an ancestor. So this word really is pointing to a genealogy, a generation of people, not a whole world, the way that this word liberty will make you think. Because the word captives is pointed to anybody who's in sin. So he's going to set us free from sin, the whole world. That's how this word liberty is misused, when it's really speaking to a particular generation of people, a particular people. All right, everyone following? Any questions?
I got a comment.
Yes, please.
So, hold on, give me 1 second, bro. My apologies. There was noise in the background. There was like a cicada. My apologies. What is Isaiah 61:1 reminded me was of Luke 4:16 through 18. If you don't mind that I read it, he said, in Nazareth, where he'd been brought up, and according to his practice, he went into the congregation on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. Now, who was celebrating the Sabbath back then? Were they Romans? Were they Chinese? Were they Japanese? No, right? We know that the Sabbath were the Hebrews who were there at the congregation. So now we know the audience. And the scroll of the prophet Yahusha was handed to him. And having unrolled the scroll, he found a place where it was written in Luke 4:18. It says, "The Spirit of Yahuwah is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring the good news to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, and release the captivities, and recovery of the sight of the blind, to send away." So he quoted Isaiah.
He quoted Isaiah to the Hebrew. That's excellent. That's excellent.
So there we find out that Yahusha, our Messiah, also had the audience. He knew what Isaiah meant way back in Isaiah 61:1. And the beautiful thing that even our Messiah also needed the audience, the people that he needed to read this to.
That's true. That's true. That's excellent. That's excellent. Precept, brother David. That's fantastic. Make sure you put that in the chat for us as well. He literally quoted 61:1, Isaiah 61:1 to a particular audience. That's excellent. Precept upon precept. Great ad. Anybody else?
I do, Brother Andrew. I wanted to piggyback off of what Brother David said. Did you notice that he stopped at verse 1 and did not read verse 2, which says, "To proclaim the year of Yahuwah's favor and the day of vengeance of our Elohim, to comfort all who mourn." Why did he stop in verse 1? Why didn't he read verse 2? It wasn't time. He wasn't there to proclaim the day of vengeance. Now is the time of vengeance. Now.
That's good. Really good.
That's excellent. Now that's a meat on your plate right there. That's excellent. Thank you both. So we see that liberty really means a genealogy, generation of particular people. Let's move to the next slide to speak on captive, and this is important. Okay, it's Shabbat. I find that interesting because this is a very popular word in the Jamaican in the Jamaican circles, the Patois-speaking Jamaican use the word Shabbat. I wonder if they know that it means captive or captives in Hebrew, and which would make sense because look at the ancient Hebrew lexicon definition. It's a forcible turning away from one's homeland to another place. Isn't that what the Jamaicans were? Are? Is? Right? Isn't that all the diaspora? We were forced from our own homeland to another place. No one, not a single other group of people were done this way but Yashar, the true people of Yashar. Now, I'm not saying war doesn't displace people, but to displace you to the four corners of the world in the way that colonialism has done, and the slave trade, and the inquisitions of the Catholic Church, that stuff was so thorough, we were truly sifted like wheat. No other nation in the world can say this. None. So this word Shabbat really means a specific people as well. And the word bound really means prisoner. And we've already told you in chapter 42, the prisoner is Yaakov Yasharel. So this audience and all that we've been talking about is really not some Gentile, no, not some other nation. It's Yasharel. The prisoners that the Bible defined, and at the time that Matthew was written, there was no other source to define who were the prisoners but the Holy Scriptures, the prophets, and Torah. That's all you had. So the author of Matthew, Yahu, would have clearly known that Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, defined who prisoners were. Us. He knew he was one of these prisoners. The Hebrews. Everybody following. All right. Any answer questions?
I'd like to highlight something that looks a bit curious to me. This word captive, the Hebrew word Shabbat, is very close to Shabbat. Shabbat is close to Shabbat. And the word Shabbat is captive. But aren't you also a captive to Yahuwah on Shabbat? You've been captivated.
Yes.
You've been captured and been brought out of Babylon into the covenant. So I find that these words are related to each other, in at least spiritually.
And Paul says that we are a slave to righteousness. We have been made free from sin in order for us to be slaves to righteousness.
And Brother Andrew, what do you do with your slave? You mark them, right? That's what they did with the slaves. They branded them, did they not? And does not Shabbat mark those who observe it? So that's how come I say that these two words have something in common. Thank you, Brother Andrew.
Oh, you're welcome, Minister. And some of us might say, who are hearing your statements, Minister, how does a day of the week mark you? Let me tell you how Torah marks. It's just not Shabbat that marks you, but Torah will mark you. When I go to work, people know who I work with daily. They know my face. I don't even have to tell them because they know there's things they cannot ask me to do. They will not offer food or certain drinks to me because Drew doesn't do it. Or they've gotten used to me not eating certain days of the week, and they put it to two and two together, and they know that I'm fasting because they know I'm a man of faith, so they know it must be fasting. So they no longer out of respect, not out of reason, but out of respect, they will not ask because Brother Drew, Mr. Drew, or something like that is fasting. My behavior in Torah, my obedience to Torah has marked me as a peculiar person. And when my neighbors throw little neighborhood barbecues and whatever else they like to do on a Saturday, They don't ask me. And when they see me on a Sunday or a Friday prior, or especially Friday prior, they know if they don't talk to me at a certain time, I'm prepping for the Shabbat. So your obedience and your adherence to the Torah and Shabbat marks you as peculiar. It does.
Mm-hmm.
And you live with this. That's why if you read the book of Maccabees, or you just study some of the early church history, the first century church, first 2 or 3 centuries, how they persecuted those who believed in keeping the Sabbath. They were very easy to find. All you got to do is look for the one that is not out shopping or working. If he's at home, pull him out of his house. That's a Sabbath keeper.
You sure right, brother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's why.
Brother David, let Brother Darkus speak, and then you can. Go ahead, brother.
I was going to caveat what you said. That's why we were never called Christians. We were called people of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Because we lived the way the Most High wanted us to, and we had a relationship with Him. And through our actions, got deemed that was appropriate to and right to the eye of the Most High. We were deemed His children, and we were set apart, as the scriptures say. And we were peculiar because we talked different, we looked different, we dressed different, we walked different, we acted different. Our mannerisms were different. We smiled different, and we were happy, different than other people were. We didn't need things, and we don't need things to make us happy. All we wanted was our brethren, and we wanted to do our statutes in peace.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what set us apart. And the category what Brother Andrew said, at my job, I mark the same way. They know they can't invite me to a lot of things, and they know I won't tolerate certain conversations, and I won't eat what they eat, and they don't ask me to go out with them to drinks after work or anything like they don't do that because they know Darkus won't do that.
Mm-hmm.
He will not do that. They see me with my friends on. I get questioned about them, and I can recite the verses to them and everything. That's what sets you apart. Is like you said, your lifestyle. We are not a religion. We are a way of life.
Mm-hmm.
We are the people. Thank you.
No problem. And Brother David, go right ahead.
I just want to support to what Minister White was saying about us being slaves. I know another word for slave is also a servant, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Psalm 136:22 it says, "An inheritance has been given to Yashar, his servant, for his love and committed is everlasting." I feel like that verse right there is also telling, is calling us a servant. But what Brother Darkus just said about that we don't need anything else besides Him. That if you guys would like to read Psalms 136, he talked about that we don't need anything else because we have His love, and like I said over here in every sentence in every Bible verse, it says everlasting for eternity. That's not for just one period of time or a decade or a century. It's everlasting.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Excellent. And you made me think. We're talking about the way, brother Darkus. We already covered this, but let's go back to Hebrews 5, verse 1 and 2. And this is where he was talking about the high priest. But listen to this, to show you that this way is a life. For every high priest, taken from among men, is ordained for men things pertaining to Elohim, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sin. Who can have compassion on the ignorant and of them that are out of the way?
Mm-hmm.
For that he himself also is compassed with infirmity. So he's talking about ignorant sinners, those who are out of the way of this life, the way of life, the way of truth, the way of Torah. That's Isaiah 5, 1, verse 2. If somebody can put that in the chat for me, please. Okay. Anybody else have anything to add? We're going to restate this verse on the next slide. All right, so let's restate it. Isaiah 61, verse 1. The Ruach of Adonai, Yahuwah, is upon me, because Yahuwah has anointed me to preach good tidings. We call the gospel in modern English, to the meek. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim the generations of those who were forcibly turned away from their homeland to another place,
Wow.
and the opening of the prison to them that are prisoners. That changes it, don't it? You can't twist that. You can't twist that.
That's why it doesn't say
the generation was not used here because it speaks to specific genealogy, not a specific time. Excuse me. I'm thinking, there we go. It's a screen blank. I'm sorry. But it's not speaking to a specific time frame either, like a generation. No. Nor the generation of the whole world. That don't even make sense. Why? Because captives tell you that Isaiah was not speaking to the world, because the world was not forcibly turned from their homeland.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a metaphorical statement. This is the only way the church can twist it. Oh, it's metaphorical. It's not really literal. In English, it's metaphorical. Maybe you can say that in English.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Hebrew, it's very clear. Very, very clear.
Matter of fact, Brad, they didn't turn away. They actually wanted to come over here to the Americas. They were seeking for other land.
Oh yeah, this is particularly. I wouldn't call them the captives then, as we would say, because not all Yasharel stayed in one place anyway. We know there's completely historical evidence that Yasharel, the Hebrews, traveled throughout the world. They made their presence known here in the Americas from north to south. But in reference to this, we're talking about the individuals that would actually force. They were not. But these individuals were. These individuals were.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anybody else?
I want to highlight one thing Brother Dorcas posted in the chat, the Hebrews 5:1 that you asked him to post.
Mm-hmm.
It's written in verse 2, Hebrews 5, verse 2. Who can have compassion on the ignorant and on them that are out of the way? What does that mean? Did not Brother Dorcas just say that we are people of the way? So
That's
he's
right.
saying his focus is to have compassion on those who are out of the way, who have stepped out of the truth, who have stepped out of the right and upright lifestyle, who are no longer in the way. They are out of the way. And it even confirms what Brother Dorcas has said right there in Hebrews 5, verse 2.
That's right. That's exactly why I wanted to put him in. And Minister White nailed it. Much better than I did. Thank you. That's exactly why I put that. I was like, oh, that lines up just right with Brother Doug.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. So let's sum it up. So in summary, the sick are sinners, specifically for Yasharel, specifically of Yasharel, right? We've been talking about this the whole time. The prisoners are prisoners of sin, iniquity, transgressions, and so on. In what we have read, the people in question are Yasharel completely. We cannot argue that. We've made that very clear. We are supposed to teach Torah to the sick and in prison, to bring them out of the dark into the light of truth and Torah, resulting in their healing. Because you got to understand what a prison was like. A prison is not what you see here. It was a place you did not want to be. It was dark. It had no light. It had no nothing. It was a miserable place. It was a dark, nasty, filthy, dreary place to be in. I hope we understand that. It's not this the idea of prison today. It was difficult. It was horrible to be in a place like that. So getting pulled out of that type of darkness and filth because of the Torah resulted in your healing.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Now, we've talked a lot about Isaiah, but we know Paul speaks of this as well. And we'll go to that next if no one has any questions or adds.
I think we're good.
All right, Minister White. Paul speaks to sin as bondage. Please read Romans 6:16, please.
Sure. Romans 6:16. Know ye not that to whom you yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants ye are to whom ye obey, whether of sin unto death, or of obedience unto righteousness?
Thank you, Minister. And I like the way you read that. That's exactly how you got to read it, make it make sense. He's saying, don't you know that whatever you yield yourself to as a servant to obey this, and I'll explain this a little bit better in a minute, whoever that person is, so he said his, right? You are the servant of him that you are obeying. Either it is of sin unto death or obedience unto righteousness. Obedience unto achieving righteousness, a state of righteousness. The word servant here is not very good because I can have a servant in my house. They're not slaves. A servant is a paid role. A slave is not.
Mm-hmm.
The word should have been translated to slave or a bondman. A bondman is someone who's in prison. They're not free. This person's not free. And Paul says you're either going to be a slave to sin or a slave to righteousness. Mm-hmm. Either or. All right? So he's telling you that if you are a servant of sin, you are a slave to him. His slave you are. Why? Because you obey him. So who are you obeying? Who is he? Is it the one who is the father of sin and death? The father of all lies and a murderer from the beginning? Mm-hmm. Or is it Yahuwah, obedience unto righteousness? So if you're a sinner, you are obeying somebody. Mm-hmm. And if you're righteous, you are obeying somebody. Someone, right? That's what Paul is saying here. All right, any questions or adds?
I just wanted to add one thing to highlight to the audience that notice that regardless of which role you choose, you are always in subjection. People walk around thinking, I'm my own man. I don't follow man. I don't do this. But this is making it very clear that you are a servant. You're in subjection. Yet you are no God. And I'm saying God. You're not your own God. You are serving someone irregardless of which side you choose. That is something that should be highlighted. You're never king. You're always a servant to the king, be it the king of sin or the king of righteousness. Thank you, Brother Andrew.
And I don't give a care. You're welcome, man. So I don't give a care how good your life is. Man, life is great. I got a guy at work that talks like that. Man, life is great. While you're great, you're still a servant to sin.
Mm-hmm. You're getting paid for it.
Yep. All right. So let's see what Yahusha has to speak about this. Brothers, can you read now? Yes, sir. Yahusha speaks to sin as bondage. John 8. Please read, sir.
John 8:31-34. Then said Yahusha to those Yahudim which believed on him, if ye continue in my word, then are ye my disciples indeed. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. They answered him, we be Abraham's seed, and we're never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, you shall be made free? Yahusha answered them, verily, verily, I say unto you, whosoever committeth sin is the servant of sin.
Thank you, sir. This is some interesting verses. Because if these individuals who are of Judea, so he's calling them Yahudim, they're just people who lived in Judah. But they said something curious. We are of Abraham's seed and never been in bondage. Well, they must not be Hebrew.
Must not.
You understand? I want y'all to understand the audience. It wasn't that Yahusha had a problem with them learning or believing in him. He didn't say that. To this day, we're supposed to be that way. You don't have to be of Yasharel to love Yah and his Torah. All right? You don't have to be that way. You love him, and you loving it the right way, you good with me. That's really what's going on here. But the problem is, these aren't Yasharel. Because they said they were never in bondage because they were Abraham's seed. Well, the true Hebrews were in bondage. They were Abraham's seed, but they were in bondage many times. And actually, the current situation that they were in, they were under the rule of another nation, which is a type of bondage. It's not true freedom. They were not free under the rule of the Romans. If that's the case, then Jerusalem would not have been destroyed 70 AD.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't even free at this time. So these are most likely, just speculation, I can't say exactly, but if they're Abraham's seed, it's probably Ishmaelites, somebody like that. I'm sorry, but that's what the text says, right? Now, Yahusha says that whosoever committed sin is the servant, and we just went over what servant is. A slave in bondage of sin. So sin is what puts you in the prison, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anybody have any questions with this one? I think we're quite clear on this.
Mm-hmm. We are.
All right. So finally, even though this took up most of this lesson, we have concluded our review of Matthew 25, where Yahusha came to them and said, for I was hungry and you fed me, I was thirsty and you gave me drink, I was naked and you clothed me, I was sick, you visited me, I was in prison and you came unto me. This was Yahusha being the minister of the covenant. All right? He was going to say who was on his right hand and who was on his left. The goats on the left, the sheep on the right. Why are they on the right? Because they did all these things. And what were these things? They taught the Torah. They clothed people in righteousness. They fed them the revelation. They got them healed through the Torah. They opened their eyes and freed them from the prison of sin. That's what this was all about. Yahusha being the minister of a better covenant. All right? Any questions?
I just wanted to add one more thing about that verse where it says, we be Abraham's seed. Excuse me. We be Abraham's seed. Do you know that King Herod, during the time of this discussion, was of Abraham's seed because he was Esau?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He was an Edomite.
That's a good point. That's so true.
He was an Edomite. So his point was true. We be Abraham's children. We were never in bondage. You got that right.
Never in bondage. And that's true. That's true. So, anybody else? Any questions?
I have a comment. So if you look at the word bondage, then you know that there's a spiritual bondage and also a physical bondage, which was attached to Israel. So if you have not been in a physical bondage to go along with the spiritual bondage, then how then do you need deliverance?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
You have never been captivated. He said, I came to set the captives free. I only came to the house of Israel to free them from captivity, physically and spiritually. So if you have not been captivated physically, then how then is he your deliverer? Because the only people that need to be delivered are those that are captivated. And you have said that you have never been captivated. So therefore, that deliverance is not for you. And neither is the promised land that you're on.
That goes, and Minister Money, that goes for the whole church. That ain't just the imposters who can't even. And what I love, y'all knows this is definitely prophecy of Daniel, where all that hidden knowledge is coming up now, and everybody learns.
Mm-hmm.
The church are imposters. The Christians are imposters.
Yeah,
they're imposters as well.
Would I call them imposters, minister? I don't even want to give them that much.
Okay.
They're wannabes.
Say what, brother?
They're wannabes.
That's it. That's perfect.
And you can look at the last three letters of what they call themselves.
Ish.
Yeah.
They want to be ish.
And if you put a W on the front of that, it gives you wish.
They are wannabes. I like that word because they want to be something that's not even in the book. And it's not that I'm not understanding. Every one of us on this call has come from the church and spent a lifetime, many of us, a whole life in it. So it's not that we're speaking out of ignorance. I left the church in anger and frustration, seeking the truth and couldn't find it, and then was concerned that that's all that was out there was what the church was offering. I was lost, floating in nowhere, thinking that I was going to die in my sin because I couldn't find answers. Bless Yah, the ministers did not give up on somebody like me. I am here because others did what Yahusha said in Matthew 25. I was sick, and they visited me. I was in that prison, in the darkness, and they shared the light with me. Bless y'all.
Bless y'all.
That's what I was given. I'm not ignorant of the church. I was there, and I could point out over and over again the lies and misdirections and the lack of understanding and teaching that the church has embedded in its doctrine to the point where it does not even know it teaches so poorly. Only the leaders do, and some of the more educated leaders, because some of the average leaders don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know. It's a deep, dark prison, the church. And as we grow in the truth, and including the audience, you have to understand these barriers and roadblocks the church has so you can speak to it effectively. Because you will run into some very, very thoroughly creative people who do not want to let go of what they have grown their entire lives in. You're dealing with a very dark and deep prison. All right. Anybody else? I think we're going to end it here for tonight. Because we're going to move back. The very next slide is to go into the book of Hebrews and start where we left off. Mm-hmm. But I think we did good covering all of this.
Your last statement, Brother Andrew. I thought about Romans 7.
Mm-hmm. What part?
Romans, I think it starts in verse 15 that says, "For where I work, I know not, for what I wish that I do not practice, but what I hate, that I do.
Oh.
It's not Paul in Romans 7 talked about fighting with the flesh, and that's what you were saying.
Mm-hmm. He's talking about the war in his members.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. That's what a lot of people have issues with. And the comment that you just said made me thought about Romans 7. That whole verse is actually what going back and forth with Paul and his flesh.
That you don't have a war unless there is an internal conflict, right? Two nations don't go to war unless there's a conflict. So if there's no conflict in you, there is no war. You're not doing what Paul is saying. But if you are fighting and arguing with yourself and struggling with something, there is a conflict in you.
Mm-hmm.
And when the truth comes into you, like it did with Paul, he was fighting all the time with his flesh because Paul spent a lifetime in Torah only, learning to only obey it by the letter, as he said, not understanding the spiritual, hidden revelation of Torah that will teach him how to fulfill the Torah's purpose correct in its fullness, what the Torah is, what its purpose was. Instead, he did it the way the Pharisees and Sadducees taught him and adhered to the commandments of man higher than the commandments of Yah as well. So Paul was just as big a sinner as anybody else, and he had a hard time letting that stuff go in the beginning. He had to relearn everything. So he had that fight within him as well, just like we all do. Paul says, I have two laws in me. Two laws. He has the laws of Yah and the law of sin and death he's got to deal with. So the conflict does not come. That war in your members does not come with those who are happy where they are. That's the point I'm making. All right. Very good, brother. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, we bless Yah for this great night. We thank Yah for the opportunity to have a lesson on Thursday. It's been a blessing. We thank Yah for it. We hope you join the House of Selah again next week as we continue in chapter 8, getting into the renewed quote-unquote covenant discussion a little more. So we thank you all, and please join us once again. Shalom, everyone.
And I want to ask the audience one more thing before we disconnect, and that is, if you've come to the end of the video and you liked it, please give it a thumbs up so that it can be pushed forward and others can find and eat of the same spiritual meat that you are partaking of. We greatly appreciate it. Look forward to fellowshipping with you again next week. Shalom.